Okay, Ian, ready when you are. Great. Okay, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for coming. So we're going to talk about writing for the SEI website. Now, like I said in the invite, this is not about publications. It's also not about press releases and some other content that we put on the website. This is about the broader pieces of work, what we call features and perspectives, and we'll talk more about the difference between them. This is really catered towards researchers, especially those who haven't written for the website before or who haven't done it since we launched the new website in March, but others I think will get some value out of this, I hope. It might give you a new way of thinking about how to formulate your ideas for content, or thinking about ways to improve your content, or if you're working with researchers, for those in the comms team, it could be very useful as well. Okay, so let's get started. I'm going to start with some numbers. I know SEI loves numbers. So these are some numbers from our website analytics. We are talking today about SEI.org, so it's our global website. And we get around 80,000 page views a month and around 20,000 monthly users, which is pretty great, and that number is actually going up. So we've got page views on the bottom here. You can see that it's been gradually improving every month, and we expect it will continue to go up, but of course that depends on having some great content. Our top countries are the US, Sweden, and the UK, and it's actually really good to see that the percentage of traffic coming from Sweden is decreasing. So that's a good sign because Sweden's population is not that large compared to some of our other audiences. We are reaching more of a global audience these days, and we are seeing other countries getting interested in our work as well. So even if you are working in an area that's not one of these top three, we do get a lot of global traffic, so do keep that in mind. Okay. Our audience groups for the SEI website, we've got a few. It's not everyone, but it is fairly broad. We've got academia and researchers, funders and donors, civil society, NGOs, policymakers, the private sector, and media. Do notice that we don't have a general audience on here, so it's not like we're a general science explainer website. We are trying to bridge science and policy, so research and policy is really, really important to us. And of course, our partners and others that work in a similar field to us. But we're not just posting absolutely anything for anyone on our website, so we do have to keep our audience in mind here. And a little bit later on, we will have an exercise where we'll go through some of the different factors to consider when formulating your idea, and we will be looking again at audience groups because it's really important. Okay, so what's in it for you? Why write for the SEI website? It's about building your networks, tapping into those thousands of people every month, promoting your expertise. If you're writing in a certain area, then that can help to get your name out there as someone who's known in the field, who's working and has interesting ideas about the work that you're doing. It's also a way of collecting your thoughts. So if you've got some idea or something you want to write about, but you haven't really thought through it in detail, putting it into something like a blog post is a really great way of formulating that idea so that next time you're at a conference or a conversation comes up, you're better equipped to make some really good points and think through what it is you're actually trying to say. It's a way of practicing your non-academic writing, which of course should also improve your academic writing, because this is about clarity and it's about being clear with what you communicate in often a quite concise way. So writing a longer academic publication is very different to writing something that's shorter and in language that's not quite so academic as well. And yeah, come on in. We've got some seats at the front as well if you want a table spot. And it's also about bridging science and policy. So like we saw when we looked at the audience groups that we're working with, we've got policymakers that we're targeting. We've got people working in media who are helping to bridge science and policy. We've got other researchers who are working in this field. And of course, writing something academic is a really important part of bridging science and policy, but if you're also writing something that's a bit more general, that's also helping to bridge science and policy. Policymakers are people too. They're not reading academic publications all day, every day. Same thing with researchers. So sometimes it really helps to add some lighter content into the mix and help to get your message out in different ways. Okay, so let's have a look at what we publish. Now, you don't have to know all of this in detail. I'm just going to give you a brief overview here. So like I said at the beginning, we are not talking about publications, but we do, of course, publish them on the website. Same for project pages. We're not talking about those. We're not talking about press releases, job pages, event pages. We are talking about this broad category of work that are our features and our perspectives. Now, features tend to be written more by the communications team, so we'll probably talk more about perspectives. The exact difference between a feature and perspective is not really that important for researchers when you're putting together your work. What's most important is what are you trying to say and how do we say it? But just in case you're curious, the general difference between features and perspectives is that features tend to be very descriptive and are often quite time specific. So it might be we have launched a new climate and security hub, or we have gone to an event and we're reporting back on what's happened, or it's some kind of announcement of some senior new staff member. They are all the sorts of things that we put into features. They also tend to be things like summaries of publications that have come out. So it's kind of a time-specific way of publishing more general content. Perspectives tend to be those that have more of a personal angle. So you as a researcher are making a point, or you have some interesting analysis that you're providing that maybe isn't provided in the publication that you're talking about, or you've gone to a conference and you're reframing what's been said rather than just reporting on what's been said. So, like I said, you don't need to know the difference between these, but just in case you're curious, there is a difference there, and it's for our users of the site. It's about how content shows up on the website and how it's categorized. All right. So I'm just very briefly going to open up the site to show you where you can find some examples. So for those of you who aren't regularly reading content on the SEI website, we often will have features on the homepage. At the moment, we've got a publication at the top, but it is quite common to see this one here as a feature on the left. We've got a perspective over here on the left as well. I'm going to click on this one. And just so you can see what is it that we're talking about, it's mostly text, of course, but we then also have some images. We have to have at least one image, and I'll tell you more about that in a moment or a little bit later. And as we scroll down, you'll see that it is quite short. So compared to publications, it's not really long. That's what we want. But every feature and every perspective is different, so they don't all look the same. And we'll talk more about that later. But you can find perspectives under this heading at the top as well, and you can browse through the site using the topic structure. So if you want to find some examples of what to use, you can have a look that way. Okay, so now we're going to go through 6 things to think about to formulate your idea, and then we're going to break and we're going to do a very quick exercise where you can start to think about something that you might potentially write about. So as we're going through these points, do have a think about something that you might write about on the website. Topic area. So what topic area do you have the experience and expertise to write about? So when we're writing perspectives in particular, we are part of the selling point. The fact that we are working at SEI, working in some specific area, that is something that's really important, and it gives our content more weight. And this is probably quite obvious for the researchers to know what is their topic area. But if you're fairly new, or if you're a comms officer looking to work with someone else and you don't have expertise in something, in some area that you want to write about, Have a think about who you can pair up with. So is there another researcher that you can pair up with to co-write an article together, or even just get them to review it to make sure that we are coming from a position of this is content we know about and we have some stake in this topic. Think about a trigger. So what is causing you to want to say something? And it can be many different things. So it could be that you have gone to a conference and you want to write something about the topics that were spoken about. It could be that you've just been working on a publication that's come out. It could be that you're working on some workshops and you want to report back on how those workshops went. It could be something in the news as well, so something that's happening in your area of expertise and you want to make some point about that, bring it back to the work at SEI. There are lots of different triggers that you can have. If you try and write a piece of content and there is no trigger, it can still be really interesting, but it's going to be a lot harder to market that to our audience and get people to click on it from social media, for instance. So it's ideal to have a trigger, so do have a think about that as well. Key message is obviously important. What are you trying to say? You don't have to have it really, really clear in your mind when you start writing, but by the end of the time that you've, sort of formulated your ideas, it should be really, really clear what it is you're trying to say, so that you can go back through and make sure that all the way through your piece of content, people know what you're trying to tell them. There is some subtlety here about when you actually make your key message explicit. In some cases, you might want to say it at the very top, especially if you're writing about something that's in the news and you want people to grab that point and run with it quickly. Maybe it's, especially if you're working with media, you want that key message to be clear right from the top. But if you're sort of, like, let's say you're talking about a conference and you're talking about all the different topics, that key message might not come out until the end. So you've sort of done this analysis and you've thought about it and you want people to take away your idea of what actually happened and why it's important. So a key message is extremely important. It might not be clear at the beginning of your writing, but it has to be clear by the time you finish so that you can make it very obvious. Your audience, so we talked about the different target groups that we have, but you should be thinking about more specifically who are you targeting. So we listed the different groups, researchers, NGOs, policymakers, and so on. Take it an extra step and think about who it is that you're writing for. You're not just writing for all researchers in the world. You might be writing for researchers interested in gender-related development work, working in Asia, for example. Or you might be writing for NGOs who are partnered with SEI in a particular continent. So something that's specific but not too specific. If your target audience is just the 3 people that went to this event, like, that's not really a good reason to put something on the website, but we do want to make it somewhat specific so that it helps you in writing your message in a way that it's actually going to make an impact. This one I think is pretty obvious to all of us. You need background, you need evidence. We're SEI, we're a research organisation. This should be pretty clear. But do just keep in mind that we're not just publishing, say, opinion pieces that are just based on your opinion. It does have to be based on your work, the research that's happening, other research happening in the field. We are science-based, evidence-based, so we need to have some kind of background and evidence to make your point. And then your value add. So this is really, really important to make something that has impact and something that will give people something to walk away with in helping them to think about this topic in a new way. Or I think one way of thinking about it is thinking back to what your expertise and your experience is. What is it about you that means that you writing about this is going to be special? What makes it different from someone else writing about it, just us commissioning a writer to write about this topic? You as the experts have some value to add, so think about adding that into your work as well. And this is often the difference between features and perspectives in many cases as well. Not in all cases, but. Okay, so here is our list of 6 things to think about when formulating your idea. Now, especially for those who've written for the website a lot, you might not have to think about these things. They might just come naturally to you. But for those of you who don't write so often for the website, or you need some guidance, then these are 6 things that you can do to really help to formulate that idea. And what I'd like you to do now is just take 2 minutes, and if you've got your phone to take some notes, or a computer or something, just jot down some notes on the top 4 things of something you might be able to write about. So your topic area, the trigger, the key message, and your audience. So keep them very, very brief, just a few words to a sentence on each one. And if you don't have a particular piece of content in mind that you could be writing about now, then you can think about something that you might have worked on some time ago that you could have written about, or something that you know is coming up in 6 months' time that you might be able to write about then. So just try and find something that you might potentially be able to write about, jot down these points, and then we'll come back and we'll have a very brief discussion. Yeah, so let's take a break for 2 minutes while you have a think about that. Do you want a little extra time? No? Okay. Great. Is my mic good? Yep. Okay. Thank you. Now you have an idea that you can write about, which is amazing. Do consider writing about it. But do we... yeah, we want your content. Is there anyone who wants to ask any questions at this point about formulating your idea before we move on to structuring and writing your content? Do we have any questions online, Ian? No? Does anyone want to share their 4 points? Any volunteers? We've got the microphone. I'll grab that. Rob, yes, please. Oh, thank you. Okay. Oh, okay, fine. Any volunteers?
I'm very shy.
Oh, we all know that, yeah.
Okay, I can go.
Thank you. Yes, Andrea.
It doesn't mean you get to put pressure on me now.
No.
Okay.
Yeah. You have to do it tomorrow. No, please go ahead.
So the topic is, can nonprofit institutions work with influencers? And so my topic area is communications, and it's the expertise in which I hopefully possess. The second one is the trigger, and I have worked with the BEIS influencer campaign for the 10YFP program, and I will work with Patricia, she's not here, with an Ålandsbanken project when we're trying to influence or train influencers for them. So the message, it remains to be seen for Ålandsbanken, but there are specific do's and don'ts from the BEIS project which I could share on. The audience, and this is where I'm getting, maybe there could be a question here, because the audience, it would be other communication officers and communication interested people, could be researchers working with communication, but also from organizations that are trying to persuade opinion, because we as a research organization don't normally do that. So then the question was, is this interesting for us or not? And if it's not, maybe I sell my piece somewhere else.
Yeah, thank you so much, Andrea. That's great. I think that point about audiences is great. We do tend to think a lot about researchers and policymakers, of course, at SEI, but we do have, other nonprofits in there, and of course, as you said, researchers are working with communications people. So just because a piece of content is maybe not resembling the sorts of things we usually do doesn't mean that it's also not a really good idea. And I think that would be fantastic. Great. Okay. One more person. Anyone want to share theirs? Or did Andrea set the bar too high? Yes. Thank you.
Okay. So I have a couple of papers actually to this autumn on electrification that has come out. So I am writing something together now. I have a draft and working with Anneli. First, perhaps a comment that for me, it feels more natural actually to do the feature rather than the perspective. Just as a comment, even though I'm the researcher here. Just, I don't know what to make of that comment, but yeah. Not writing opinionated pieces is I guess the thing there. Okay, so topic area, transportation, deep decarbonization, and electrification specifically, although that's not sort of a clear topic for SEI per se. So transport, energy, deep carb. Trigger, so it's sort of an update of these continued steep declines in battery cost. So that's the trigger because it has a wide sort of audience interest. And then key message, electrification is more and more likely in more and more parts of the transport sector. Audience, policymakers, funders, and also partner organizations, actors, which is sort of a cross between the bullets that you have. So it's like reaching sort of a new, or sort of selling one's image that you're working in a certain field to partnering organization, which are researchers in some institute or NGO potentially, but it's sort of like a cross between a few of your bullets, perhaps. Yeah. Perfect. So that's the four.
Great. Thank you so much.
Can I just say something quickly?
Yes, go ahead.
There's two things actually about your first comment about being more comfortable writing a feature than a perspective, and I mean I don't think we'd insist on one or the other, so that's cool, and especially for a journal article perhaps or a publication, then often the feature is a good way of doing a more explanatory sort of summary, making something that's perhaps quite detailed and academic more accessible. However, I want to just throw in, I think it's wrong to think about perspectives as representing opinion. They might be go out as far as that, being a sort of op-ed light thing, but they're not really about opinion. They're simply a different way of writing. They're a way of writing where the work that you've done comes to the fore rather than sort of hiding behind the facts and the evidence. You actually say I rather than we found that. and you bring that into it, and you bring a more sort of personal reflection into it. It's not about opinion. It's just a different way of writing. I think it's important.
I just add something to that about the perspectives. I think it's also a way of putting your findings to a different audience or in a different context from the one you've targeted with the academic paper, or say.
Yeah, for sure. Great. Thank you, everyone. Annalie, comment.
I just have a question regarding the trigger. When I was thinking about my trigger, I was thinking of a workshop, and I just felt a little bit lame. Like, does it have to be something big, a big launch, big event,
No, and it's a really good point, because a lot of the really good work that we do is not tied with some big international launch or anything. A workshop, I think, is a perfect trigger. It's more about sort of putting your piece of work in a place in time, so that when we are communicating it and when we're introducing the piece, it's not just coming out of nowhere. So it's anchoring that piece of work to something that will mean something to people, if that makes sense. Yeah. Great. Okay. Nice work, everyone. Let's move on to the next part, which is about structuring your content. So you've got your idea that you want to write about. What happens next? A few things to keep in mind. One is the language. So as we've touched on before, we want to keep the language fairly accessible, fairly readable to a general audience, even if you are targeting an expert audience. And the reason for that is largely around, it's a shorter form piece of work than your publications. It's something we want people to read fairly quickly. And we do that by keeping, we can use some pieces of jargon if it is really important for the piece of work that you're doing, but we try and strip it back to make the language accessible. So that's one thing to keep in mind. Another one is to aim for around 600 to 900 words. And as I said, not every feature and perspective is the same. Some will be quite short and still be effective. Some can be long and be effective. But if you don't have a good reason for having something very short or very long, then aim for about the mid-range in there, around 700 or 800 words. Also consider headings. So you can have your text on the page, but the unfortunate reality about writing content for the web is that people will not always read from top to bottom. They will sometimes come and they will know that there's something in there that they want to find, and so they try and find it. So they sort of scan through, they might just read the intro and conclusion, or they might try and find a key point and then leave. We can't really fight that. That's just the way that people use the web. So if we use headings, then we can help people find the right part of the content. It also helps to break up the text into key sections to help people get the flow of the content a bit better. You can also refer to examples. I find that this is really useful. Just as a quick refresher, before you write a perspective, just have a look at something that's already online. And I do encourage you to look at the top 5 reports that get sent out every month, because those are bringing forward the pieces of content that are doing really well with our audience. And it's based on a number of factors, but the main one is page views. So if you're trying to base your work off something else, it's best to base it off something that has been successful. Now, if you're not that comfortable writing in English, that is totally fine, because your piece will go through editing at the end. What's important is to focus on the structure. So what is the point you're trying to make? Put things in the right order. It's a lot easier for editors to work on individual sentences and making them feel natural and sounding good than it is to try and restructure your thinking and your arguments. So if you're not that comfortable with English, it's fine. Editors are here partly for that reason, but do really think about your structure. That's most important to get right. Now, you've probably seen some version of this diagram before when you're structuring your writing. It's useful in this context as well. So we are thinking about SEI is an organization that's global, and it works on many different topic areas. So with the first paragraph or two in your piece of writing, you want to make it clear and you want to filter it down so that people know what kind of thing that you're writing about. Take the big wide world and reduce it into your topic that you're talking about. The body is, of course, your main points. And it's really important, of course, to structure your argument within that section. And then at the conclusion, we might want to broaden it out again and talk about, especially in perspectives, have just a point or two about how this applies to the broader context. So what this research means, or how we can learn from this, or what you have learnt from this. I did think about going into more detail on these, but it's not really that different from structuring other pieces of work. It's just more a case of getting the length of it down to a smaller piece. But writing for the web is not just about writing words. So do consider images. We do need at least one image to help with promoting the piece. It's what shows on the home page or on the topic pages on the site when people are browsing the website. And you can have many images if you like. We can have, one at the top, one in the middle, one at the bottom. You can have a few in the middle. You can have a photo gallery at the end. But think about what the image is actually achieving. We will talk a little bit more about that, but we don't just want to put images in for the sake of putting images in. They are part of the storytelling process. Let's come back to that one though. But you can also think about having a box of key takeaways, or you could have a graphic representation of some idea. So let's say it's really effective for you to think about some new model when you draw it on a whiteboard. Well, we can actually turn that into a piece of graphic representation that can help to communicate that idea alongside the text. It's often good to mix up explaining things with visuals as well as in text. Of course, if you've got charts or infographics, they can be good, but again, this is not an academic publication, so we're pulling out the pieces that are making the point that you're trying to make really clear. We'll get back to photos, but videos is also one possibility. So you might have a brief interview with, if you're the researcher who worked on this piece of work, you might want to have an interview if it's going into a feature to promote some new publication. Or you might have another kind of video which is summarizing some event. And of course, videos can be very easy to create. They can also take quite a lot of time. There's a big range there, but it is an option. But let's talk more about multimedia because it is really important. So photos that have been taken in the context of the work that you're writing about are really valuable because not only do they help to communicate what you're trying to say and give some very quick context about what it is we're talking about, it also shows a level of authenticity that SEI has. We are there, we're doing research, we're at these conferences, we are there, we're not just content creators trying to piece together other people's work. So if you have photos that you've taken on the field or at events, then they are really valuable to have. Even if the quality is not fantastic, even if you don't have a professional photographer, they can still be an important part of telling a story. Within limitations, of course. If it's really dark and you can't see who's in the photo, maybe we don't want to include it. Now, if you don't have any photos, then have a think about the theme of what you're trying to say, the topic and the key message. And is there some way that we can use a photo to help to represent those ideas, something that symbolizes what you're talking about? We can get some stock photos. So those in the communications team have access to Getty Images to get some stock photos if we don't have any real SEI photos to use. But think about, help them to find a good photo. Think about what it is that symbolizes your work. Because there are often some sensitivities here that the communications team might not know about unless you tell them. So is it okay to show, in this case, if we're talking about sanitation, we probably don't want to show a Western toilet if we're talking about another kind of toilet in the research. Or if we're talking about behavior and choice and we're not talking about people biking to work, we're actually talking about how people use different kinds of cook stoves, then that's really useful in finding a good image. So have a think about the kinds of images that represent your work if you don't have any photos to use. And of course, graphics and infographics are really great as well. At the end, I'll talk about how you can get in touch with us to request some work if you have an idea for a new graphic that could communicate what you're working on. Charts, like I said, we want to be a little bit selective. We don't want to put everything into a more accessible piece, but they can be really effective at getting a key point across as well. So just think about the different options that we have and also where in the text it should sit. So if you sort of write your text and then just put a whole bunch of multimedia at the end, it doesn't really, the multimedia isn't really part of the story that you're trying to tell. So think about, if you've got some event photo about someone who was speaking at the event, thinking about how you can structure your text so that you can then put that photo right after the piece where you were making the point that they were making when they were speaking. And that can really help to break up the text in a natural way and help keep people interested rather than just having a bunch of extra stuff at the end. And then some of you are sitting here, you probably know a lot of this already. Or others might want to, in your first piece of content, make it really special. So here are some tips for making it more effective. Like I said, do check the top 5 analytics reports each month. If you're not regularly reading the content that's going up on the website, then just make an effort to read what comes out in the top 5, because they will give you a really good idea of what's resonating with our audience and what is doing well. Like I said, think about the placement of your images and text and also the purpose of them. If you think about, if you have a graph, let's say or a bar chart, let's say you've got a bar chart that communicates something. Really think about what is this bar chart saying and is it clear? If it's not saying something clearly, maybe it's not worth putting into the feature or the perspective. If it is saying something clearly, then write a caption for it because not everyone will be as quick at reading graphs as you might be. So if you can write a really effective caption, that can really help with getting the point across. If you've got some table of content, then think about why is it that you're putting it in there and where is the best place in the text to make it work. So same thing when you're sort of writing your list of key points you want to put in the body of your work. Also think about a chart might actually be one of those points. It might show a trend. It might do something that helps you make your argument. So really think about the purpose of those as well. Titles are really, really important as well. And I'm going to switch back to the website to show you what I mean. So this up here is the title. And the reason why it's so important is that it's incredibly useful. It's incredibly important for search engines like Google. So if you have a title that sounds kind of interesting, but by reading it, it's not very clear what you're talking about, then when people are searching online for information about that topic, then if it's not in the title somehow, then it might not actually be found. So if you're talking about something and it's about a very specific kind of topic, then make sure you think about those keywords. What are people going to be searching for in Google? What are people going to be looking for in a title? And try and make sure it's included in here somehow. This can get a little bit tricky because in some cases you do want to still make it interesting or maybe in a new way. You want to show that this is not just any old piece talking about a topic. You're not going to call your piece of content global climate adaptation because that says nothing about what you're actually saying. But combine the topic with what it is that you're saying. So have it interesting, have some keywords in there. And again, this is quite a lot of information, but for those of you looking to improve your content, also think about the first 2 or 3 words, because when people are scrolling through a big list of content, and this might be on our website or on Google, they are not going to read everything. most people will be scanning through this list of content. And what they are likely to do is read the first few words of each one, sometimes maybe the last one as well, to try and get an idea if this is something that's relevant to them. So this is really, really tricky to do effectively. It's called front loading. You want to front load your content so that the people will understand what it's about as soon as possible. But of course, we still also want to keep it interesting. So thinking about titles is one way that you can really make your content stand out more on social media and in lists and on search engines, but it's not easy to get right. And talk to your editor when you're working on that if you're not sure, and they can help with that. Something else to consider is timing. So when we are publishing the piece of work. So fastest is not always best. So getting something out on the website just because it's done is not always the most effective method. Because we might have a really busy week of other things coming out on the website. And if we've got 5 things coming out on one day and yours is one of them because you wanted it up there as soon as possible, it can get a little bit lost in the mix of everything else that's happening. Our web audience are human, we've got limited attention, we can't read everything that goes out. So fastest is not always best. Sometimes it is if you've got a really time-sensitive trigger, like you're writing on something that happened last week and you want to be one of the first people getting out there with some content, then yes, it makes sense to get it out as soon as possible, but that doesn't always mean that we put it up immediately. That's not always what's best for the content. And of course, you can plan this ahead, especially if you're working on, say, a publication which is going to be released at a certain time and you've got a media embargo and you want your feature to come out on the same day. We can plan that ahead of time. So yeah, do stay in touch with the comms team on the actual timing of things so we can make it work really well, the content. And like Andrea brought up earlier, there are opportunities to publish on other websites as well. There's also opportunities to publish on other websites and the SEI website. So this is what's called cross-posting, and it's kind of up to the organization that you're pitching to whether they will let us publish content that's also going up on their website. So some organizations like The Conversation are happy for us to publish work written by SEI employees that also goes up on The Conversation's website. And that can be really great because you're not only getting to the SEI audience, you're also getting out to The Conversation's audience. In some cases though, if you want to reach a very specific audience, let's say you've chosen some blog that's working in an area that you're researching, let's say it's Antarctic resilience, and they say that they want to do an exclusive and they will own the copyright of the content that goes online, then that will mean that we can't also post on our website. So there are different arrangements with different organizations, but if that's the best way for you to reach your audience, that might be more effective than going out on the SEI website. So the SEI website does have this amazing global reach with lots of people, different topic areas, but because it's not a niche publication, there are other options for you to reach people by reaching out to other organizations as well. So you can discuss that with the communications team. Once it is online, it really, really helps if you help us spread the message to your own networks. So again, thinking about who is the audience. If you're writing to researchers working in the same field as you, then you probably have some really good contacts of people who would like to read this piece of work. So if you can actually reach out to them, share it with them in your own networks, that can be a really great way of getting it to the right people. Same goes with if you have social media. If you're building up your own network of people working in a particular area, then if you share on your network, then that will help to spread the message to the right people. So your networks are really valuable, even if you don't have that many Twitter followers or that many email contacts. You can be targeting people that you know are going to be really interested in that work, and they might then share it with their own networks as well. Also think about your partners, project partners, and whether they can potentially also share it on their networks, on social media, in their email newsletters, whatever it might be. There are plenty of opportunities to help spread the message. More. We've got a microphone somewhere. Rob's got it, yes.
I just wanted to make a comment. Spreading the message is so important, and there's actually a component worth mentioning. We have a component called suggested tweet, so that you can actually, in your piece, add a component making a suggestion to people to spread your content. Yes. And we're not using it that much today, and I think we can do much more.
Great, thank you, Mo. I'm just going to bring one up here so you can see what that looks like. Nope, it's not that one. This one. So we can help people tweet as well. So that's another option of something that we can be putting inside the content itself. Great. Okay, so a couple more things. One is that we have some areas of content on the website where we're not publishing to very frequently at the moment. So this list will change as time goes on, but I compiled it, I think, last week. And these are areas where we're not posting very much content to. It might be one every few months, or even in some cases, one every year or so. So if you work in these particular areas, please do put extra consideration into writing content for the website, because we're a little bit lacking on these ones. So there are a number of gender-related subtopics, gender relating to household energy, sanitation, behaviour and choice, renewables, food and agriculture, health relating to household energy, food and agriculture and well-being, land relating to cities, governance relating to innovation, water on cities, and economy on bioeconomy. So if you're not familiar with the way the topic and subtopic structure works on the website, we will tag new pieces of content on a subtopic level. So I'll show you here on the website. If we view all topics, you'll see that topics are on the left, they're the main ones, but then subtopics are on the right here. And so if you're writing something on climate adaptation, that's a little bit different to writing something on gender adaptation, for example. The subtopic pages will pull together adaptation-related content from various topics, but if you have a look at the topic pages, let's go to gender, because that's one that is not updated very often. We do pull out content that is on these specific subtopics. So anything related to gender adaptation, we'll highlight one here, and these pages are updated once a week. Behaviour and choice, we pull out a highlight, and so on. So if you're posting content on one of these topic areas, subtopic areas that we're not posting to very often, you will get more exposure on the website as well. I've mentioned this a few times, but try aiming for the top 5. You can see the reports on Yammer, and I send them out every month. Don't feel too bad if you don't make it, because it's a global organization with many people. We do publish quite a lot each month. And often the things that are in the top 5 are ones that relate to quite big announcements or so on. But that said, there's definitely room to get features and perspectives on things, related to a workshop or something that's a smaller trigger within these top 5. So try and aim for it. And if you've written something and it's not in the top 5 and you think it should have been in the top 5, then you can get in touch with maybe the editor you worked with to try and get some feedback, or we can maybe no. Well, what I will say from an analytics point of view, if you want an in-depth analytics report on the actual web traffic, we usually do that on in a project budget level. So you'd have to, I'm just trying to take the stress out of Casper's face here. So yeah. So we can't give individual reports on each piece of content is what I'm trying to say. Do we have the microphone for Annalie?
Annalie here again.
Yeah.
A very quick question. Do you know approximately how many perspectives and how many features are published every month?
Oh, good question. We have done those numbers. I don't have them off the top of my head. Moa, do you? I mean, I think we're posting at least 3 a week. So there might be a couple of features and a perspective each week, I think would be normal. But it does vary quite a lot. Some weeks we might have a lot of publications and not much else. And some weeks we might have a new feature every day. So it varies. And it also varies with the seasons. So it's a lot quieter in summer and probably going to be quiet again with the winter break. Yes. Okay, so we're almost done before we can have some more questions. But I do want to also show you this. So who do you contact? When you've got your great idea, you've put down your thoughts on what you should be writing about. Now the question is, who do you contact? So in most cases, you will contact your communications officer. If your project or initiative has a communications officer, contact them. They will be the one that interface with the rest of the comms team. They'll find an editor if they're not an editor themselves. They will get it published on the website. They're your point of contact. If your project or initiative does not have a communications officer, but you're writing something that ties into a publication, so say it's a feature on a piece of work that's coming up, then use your contacts with the publications team so that it can be prepared as a package. So email the publications inbox. If the answer to these 2 questions is no, we have a brand new inbox. It's called communications@sei.org. You should not be contacting this very often because in most cases you'll be able to contact your communications officer. But if you would like to make a request for some work that goes outside project time, then you can get in touch with the comms inbox and we can see what options we've got. Oh, Andrea, yes.
So I will be one of the 2 people reading the communications inbox. And just to clarify that, I mean, not all, very few projects have communications officers connected to them. So I think that this will be an option for many of you in Stockholm. In Stockholm, exactly.
Great, thanks, Andrea. Good clarification. Okay. And then we have something else that I think is extremely exciting. I don't know how exciting it is for everyone here today, but it's the communications guide, which is coming out soon. Okay, it's not ready yet. I'm sorry. Probably going to be released early next year, and it will be a sort of a self-serve place where you can go to find out information about the different kinds of content that we publish and how to interface with the communications team and find the different guidance and templates that we have. So it's not ready yet, but just so you know, it will be coming soon. So there's not much more I can say about it for now, but I think it will be really useful, and not just for people in the communications team, but also for, say, researchers who just want to get some quick tips on writing a feature or, even a publication. You'll be able to find things like the publications guidance and the peer review process and everything else in one place. So that will come out hopefully before too long. And that's it from me. So we've got some questions. Yes, one online.
Yeah, one from Eric Benedict. How did we come up with the ideal length for perspectives? It depends, but many sites recommend over 1,000 words, preferably around 2,000. And also, Eric, I like seeing the top 5 to see what my colleagues are doing, but I don't find it helpful to refine my own writings. The factors of success don't seem easily generalizable.
Good comments. Thank you, Eric. So let's do the second one first about using it as a reference. You're absolutely right in that every feature and perspective is different. I know that Eric has written some very successful pieces of content for the website before, but for those of you who maybe haven't written that much, then I hope it will be of more use, but maybe you'll find that it's not really of use as well. In terms of the length, we've not used some amazing formula to put this together. Based on my past experience, I did work at the Australian Academy of Science, where we were trying to figure out a good length for our science communication pieces, and it was a different audience group, but we are finding that longer pieces are harder to market to an audience. And given that SEI is also putting out longer publications, it kind of makes sense to keep these fairly short. But that said, there is nothing stopping us from putting out a longer piece of work. So if you have, a 1,000 or 2,000 word piece of content, if it's a really good, well-structured piece of content, we'll definitely consider that. But let's keep it a bit shorter for a general guidance, I think. So thanks, Eric. Yes, any other questions? Thanks. No? We've got a few minutes. Okay, thank you everyone for coming, and yeah, let's write some content.